Good afternoon. Greetings from Kolkata. My heartfelt congratulations to the organizers of Women Entrepreneurs Hackathon, Dr. Anjali Nigam, Professor and Head of the MERI Incubation Center, and her team for this fantastic, socially meaningful initiative. As I see it, such initiatives are vital not only to tap India's promising spirit of innovation and enterprise building, but also to motivate young India, particularly women, who are many a times overlooked and marginalized in the formal discourse of innovation and enterprise building. After all, it is very easy to forget the invaluable spirit of innovation, creative thinking, management practices, highly personalized and efficient skill sets that women have contributed from time immemorial to the home enterprise, displaying an entrepreneurship that was based on selfless service, sacrifice, compassion, zero profit, and self-negation. Ladies and gentlemen, I come here with a jubilant spirit of gratification and celebration, but I also realize the huge responsibility on this group to not only represent the hopes and aspirations of millions of women from the past, their enormous sacrifices so we could be here today, but also the duty that lie on us to bear the torch for future generations of women to be motivated to carry on the spirit of entrepreneurship, creativity, and efforts of innovation. I see this Women-Centered Entrepreneurs Hackathon as a coming together of dreams, vision, creativity, insight, and experience, having immense possibilities of achieving a higher purpose that transcend narrow selfish interests. To realize this elevated and augmented entrepreneurship, I would like us to reflect on a couple of interconnected concepts that could impart meaning, purpose, and utility to any enterprise. This is only possible when entrepreneurs work from a field of awareness that is focused more on the means rather than the final achievement of the goal. Ladies and gentlemen, innovative enterprises leave footprints of human entrepreneurs who are probably the closest earthly reflection of the creator of this universe. Remember Shah Rukh Khan in Swadesh, the young entrepreneur who brought water to the famine-infested rural society? At that moment, he was leaving the creator's footprint on his creation. Imagine this vast Imagine this vast universe, its brilliant intelligence, where every small and big, pure and impure, good and bad, kind and unkind, work in silent cohesion, each with its own demarcated space, with the wisdom that we identify as divinity. The solar system, the change of season, the ecological calendar and the nature, the cycle of birth, life, and final annihilation all work towards the realization of the harmony of existence, our perfect enterprise, the universe around us. For me, thus, there can be no innovation or enterprise building from anywhere outside this field of awareness. Hence, my proposal and emphasis on the concept of enlightened entrepreneurship. Before I go into enlightened entrepreneurship, let us reflect on a few examples that form the repertoire of lessons for any entrepreneur. The first, the Manhattan Project. Manhattan Project was conceived by the US, as you all know of, in the Second World War that culminated into the devastation of Hiroshima, Nagasaki in Japan. There were two scientists I would like to name out here, Louis Alvarez and, of course, Einstein. Louis Alvarez was an American experimental physicist and winner of the 1968 Nobel Prize in Physics. In 1944, Alvarez went to New Mexico to work on the Manhattan Project. He devised an electrical detonation method for the plutonium bomb. He and his graduate student Lawrence Johnston also designed equipment to measure the energy released by a nuclear explosion. The two scientists flew in an observation aircraft called the Great Artiste as a scientific observer to the Hiroshima bombing to measure how powerful the nuclear explosions had been. Alvarez was never the same again. He lived in anger and remorse for the rest of his life. Short-tempered and scathing, he was a living terror for most in Berkeley, where he lived. Albert Einstein, in August 1939, nuclear physicists came to Einstein, not for scientific, but for some political help. The fission of the uranium nucleus had recently been discovered. A long-time friend, Leo Szilard, and other physicists realized that uranium might be used for enormously devastating bombs. They had reason to fear that Nazi Germany might construct such weapons. Einstein, reacting to the danger from Hitler's aggression, had already abandoned Germany and immigrated to the US. He felt he needed to sign the letter that was delivered to the American President Franklin Roosevelt, warning him to take action. This letter and a second Einstein-Szilard letter of the March 1940 joined efforts by other scientists to prod the United States government into preparing for the nuclear war. After the war, it was discovered that Germany never had plans for nuclear bomb. Einstein regretted being part of this signing group forever till his death. Let me give you an Einstein's quote. Concern for man himself must always constitute the chief objective of all technological effort. Concern for the big, unsolved problems of how to organize human work and the distribution of commodities in such a manner as to assure that the results of our scientific thinking may be a blessing to mankind and not a curse. The third example is that of Alfred Nobel. He was the famous scientist who invented the dynamite, which soon was used worldwide for mining and infrastructure development. After reading an erroneous obituary which condemned him as a war profiteer, this is very interesting because what really happened was he woke up a morning and he read his own obituary, which was mistakenly written by a newspaper journalist because he had taken the news about Nobel's brother who lived in a different city. So it was an erroneous obituary which condemned, and he had condemned him as a war profiteer. Nobel was then shocked, and later he bequeathed his fortune to the Nobel Prize institution, which would annually recognize those who conferred the greatest benefit to mankind. Ladies and gentlemen, enlightened entrepreneurship. These were just some anecdotes to just make us think about what is the necessity and why we would like to move towards an entrepreneurship that was enlightened. What is enlightened entrepreneurship? Every society has certain commonly understood and accepted values, collective consciousness that provides the wider paradigm and worldview within which the individuals living in the society operates. Education is the primary instrument to orient individuals to these values. Thus, value-enabled education is the first step to ensuring enlightened entrepreneurship because it emphasizes on the choices made or the means we adopt in achieving a particular goal. Both goal and end may be socially institutionalized, but the emphasis is what is significant in enlightened entrepreneurship. The emphasis is on the means. Education here is not just a reference to formal institutionalized education, it is a reference to the creation of a general collective conscience in society that is elevated, value-centric, universal, and its capacity is directed to certain fundamental parameters. I have demarcated 4 parameters. The first is to look at education which differentiates knowledge and information from wisdom. The connected view of interdisciplinary knowledge creation through science and arts and religion for the welfare and well-being of humanity. The second parameter, ladies and gentlemen, would be the awareness of existing reality. The reality where we live. Education which is directed to pronounce this awareness. The first awareness-centric awareness of this existing reality would be the distinction that one makes between tangible material reality around us and the deeper, undefinable existential reality that is within us. So we make a distinction. We need an education system which allows us to make this distinction very obvious. Most of the time, we get so embroiled with the external reality that we almost forget that there is something within us which actually directs and manifests in this externality. We need an education system to make us aware, to make us live in this awareness. Second, of course, the pragmatic and scientific data-based awareness of our era. For example, the era that we live in is a unique stage of planetism, which proves that we can no longer view the planet as an infinite reservoir of resources that can be quickly exploited to build empires as soon as possible. We live in a finite planet with tangible biophysical limits, and human beings cannot build infinite resource-based enterprises under finite conditions. This is the second field of awareness. The third, it's also significant in my opinion, it is the awareness of lessons learned from history. An entrepreneur has to realize the significance of perceiving reality around him from the intersection of history and his biography. From the perspective of India, I can say that every Indian has to be aware that his biographical experiences of today in the global context is a build-up of the unique historical circumstances that have led to his being an Indian in the global context from the historical circumstances. In this context, two ideas need reflection from the Indian perspective. Firstly, the invaluable resources of ancient texts like the Vedas, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita that can contribute enormously towards self-management practices, goal management skills, self-realization for a higher goal beyond the self that are vital for entrepreneurship, for utility, resilience, and impact. These are not just a religious connotation or implication. They don't just have religious implications. They are actually tangible self-management guides. They are toolbooks, and we need to understand and abide by them. Indians are fortunate that way because, historically speaking, for the rest of the world, entrepreneurship was always goal-oriented. For example, Hitler's empire rested on an outstanding modern rational scientific edifice. The goal was, as we know, was devastating. Conversely, if we look at the elevated character of Indian freedom struggle, it is evident that no other nation in the world could rise against the onslaught of colonial masters in a mass movement that was not only focused on the power of self-realization and Swaraj, as seen in Gandhi's non-violence, but also in Netaji's power of mobilization, military prowess, and strategic planning. In fact, it is recorded historically that when armed revolutionaries were sent to the gallows, they carried a copy of Gita and Vivekananda with them. In both situations, we'll see enlightened self-realization and self-management in leaders, qualities that are invaluable in the growth of entrepreneurship. Works of Vivekananda show that very, very clearly. These leaders were enlightened leaders, socialized in the wisdom inherent in our ancient texts, and viewed modernization in a very different way than their Western counterpart. Finally, education will also have to create a field of awareness which is sensitive to the insights about our connected, borderless, and universal field of existence, where being selfless is ultimately the only path for perpetuating the self. Humanism will have to win over beyond narrow individual interests. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope it was a privilege to address these bright young minds with the hope that the kind of entrepreneurship that we are going to see is going to be responsible, is going to be universal, it is going to be inclusive. All my best wishes to these young minds, and I wish the organizers a very, very enlightening and enriching outcome of this event. Thank you very much.